Good morning, friends. It's the 8th Sunday after Trinity today. Intent, wisdom. And we'd all like more of that, I'm sure. But let's just unpack this idea of wisdom. We perhaps use the word a little bit loosely. Just see where it comes from, how we can encourage more of it in the world, and especially how we might bring more of it through in our lives, how we can actually utilize it. The collect, as usual, gives us the clues in a very concentrated way, but we look at this first just to give us something to think about and for our intuition to start working. The collect reads, "O God, who art the wisdom of the wise and the strength of the strong, whose beauty shines through the whole universe." So here we have three things, all packed into 2 or 3 lines. We have the idea that this is coming from the Creator, coming through the Christ to us. Wisdom of the wise. So in other words, when we see or when we experience wisdom through ourselves, inspiration, whatever, when we hear words that we say, gee, that's a very wise thing to say, we should be aware of the source of it. So it just doesn't spring from nowhere. And similarly, the strength of the strong. So at the moment, we're enjoying looking at the Commonwealth Games, and we're enjoying looking at weightlifters who can lift extraordinary amounts of weight. We're not necessarily talking about that, although it's still the same source. We're talking about other manifestations of strength. Something like the ability to stand up against difficulties. The force that we feel when we're opposing the wrong things and we want to do something about it. That strength we need. Something like willpower, but it's something behind the willpower, that strength. And now the third component, whose beauty shines through the whole universe. So maybe this is a strange concept of thinking that beauty shines through the whole universe. But there's one thing I think we all respond to, and that's beauty. We think about statues from the ancient Greek, well, both part of the world, and we see them in museums. And the Greeks very much thought that beauty was an essential part of living. German philosophers used to think we must experience beauty every day in order for us to be spiritually inclined, but more importantly, in alignment with the things that we should be doing. So those are things that we think about in the physical world, but we can think about beauty as being a source of inspiration and a source of just feeling good about ourselves for a moment, just rejoicing in the fact that there's beauty there in whatever form. And so this beauty is coming from the Father as well through the Christ, through the whole universe, and then manifests in different ways in our physical experience. So then the collect goes on where we aspire to a particular state, and always when we want to improve or change or develop, we aspire first. We say, this is what we want to do. We never get put off with the fact that we're not quite there yet, but we always aspire to do it and put some energy into that aspiration so that things start to move, positive things start to move in our lives. This is not sort of New Age stuff. This is the way the laws of God work. We aspire to do what we want to do, and that's what tends to happen. Whatever you tend to think about, that's what tends to come about. And the collect says, may we open our hearts to the spirit of wisdom and understanding, and that we may ever be strong in thee. So we've been explained where the stuff comes from, these basic attributes, and now we aspire to have them coming through us. We open ourselves to the possibility that they'll come through us. We want them to come through us. And so then, what's the outcome? The outcome is the conclusion of the collect. You, we regard, Father, we regard as the rock of ages, and we want to show forth in our lives the beauty of holiness. So there is another thing connected to this idea of beauty, holiness. So in other words, we can see the whole package in these few short words. We can see beauty and holiness, and we're going to link it through to peace in just a moment. So the epistle that Wendy read this morning from St. James, he's talking to people. Well, he's writing a letter to people, but it reads as if he's talking to people. Who is wise and imbued with knowledge among you? And the writer goes on, James goes on to say, let him show that he is by his actions and the way that he speaks, the way that he conducts himself. Because in another parable that we might be aware of, that Jesus always says, by your fruits ye shall know them. So if you're trying to work out whether a thing is good or bad, if you're trying to work out whether the person in front of you is sincere or otherwise, you don't have to rush to judgment. You just have to wait. Their behaviour will tell you where they're coming from. So the epistle goes on to say that wisdom is from above and is pure. And then the epistle concludes with these very powerful thoughts. The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace, in the peace of them that make peace. Now, we're very aware in the world at the moment of the conflict that is in a number of different places. And it always seems to go in cycles. And we wonder how we can break this. How can we actually break it? Is it possible in the human condition to find sustainable peace? Well, so far, no luck. Where else can we look? We can look here. We can look at these words. There's nothing mamby-pamby about this. There's nothing impractical about this. This is about the aspirations of people that are involved in diplomacy. This is the aspirations about people that genuinely seek peace. We absolutely must cultivate this in ourselves if we are to be generators of peace where we are. And that's all we can do. Just influence the environment where we are. And those ripples, you can be sure, travel out from us through our community, through our cities, through our nation, through the world. Absolutely. Those feelings, those influences affect us all. And then the gospel captures a personal anecdote. And this is the personal anecdote of Jesus when he's been taken to Jerusalem by his parents. Every Passover, they went to Jerusalem, as all devout Jews would want to do, go on this pilgrimage once a year to the Passover. That's our Easter time. That's where our Easter comes from. And they attended the services and then travelled back home, back to where they lived, Bethlehem, or wherever they came from. So they just thought, in all the hubbub of moving along, and in this caravan, they just would have been walking along a particular path. Maybe they had donkeys, maybe they had camels to travel things, but it was a sort of a happy band, you could imagine. They would have thought, oh, well, we can't sort of see where Jesus is, but he must be there somewhere. But after a day, he didn't turn up. Perhaps he didn't come home for dinner. And perhaps they thought, a 12-year-old is always hungry. I wonder where he is. It doesn't necessarily say that in the gospel. But they then thought, he's not in the company, and returned to Jerusalem. And what did they find? They found him sitting amongst the learned aspects of the senior members of that synagogue, called the doctors. And they were the people that knew the law, who could interpret it to people, and also interpret it to people who wanted to learn more and more about the law of God, the law of the Jews, as they read it. And what was he doing? He was sitting amongst them, but was he passively listening? No. He was participating, asking them questions, giving them answers. They were asking questions of him, and they were all amazed. And his mother came up to him, and she was probably a bit cross, and because she'd been looking all over the place and thought this was a bit bad, that he was being a bit inconsiderate. And she said, "What do you think you're doing? You're causing us a great deal of grief, your father and I." And what did he say? Did he say, "Sorry, Mum"? No, he didn't say, "Sorry, Mum." He said, "I'm about my Father's business. Where do you think I should be?" Okay, maybe that sounds a little bit impertinent. Maybe a 12-year-old Jesus was just flexing his adolescent muscles just a little bit. But the message is, at that point in his development, in his spiritual unfoldment, he knew what his path was. And the wisdom that was inherent in him was being brought out by the actions of the Father. Jesus refers to this all the time, and we refer to it very often. When Jesus was speaking to his disciples, he always says to them, "You must know, and I keep telling you, all the things you hear me saying are coming from the Father. He is informing me, he's inspiring me, and I am speaking to you, channeling the words of the Father." And here we see the early example of that occurring. He's in his Father's house, God the Father, not necessarily Joseph. He's in this God the Father's house. And he's saying, "I now need to get about my Father's business." But he returned with them and was obedient. But, as it says, Mary held all these thoughts in her heart and wondered what they would mean. So we recall Mary's life and her experiences. At the birth of Jesus, the angels, the wise men, many events in her life. She tries to string them all together, tries to understand what they mean. So, what can we pick up from wisdom, from this intent? We can pick up that it's not in isolation, that it comes with strength,